to fund things like, an example is our aftercare or the follow-up support we provide to those whom we house who have supportive needs. And so that is something that we are exploring. Same thing as far as how can we build Medicaid to support those who have food insecurity. If someone we feed have 8,000 meals that we push out every week, how can we use Medicaid to maybe increase that amount, you know? And so those are things that we are actively looking at as an agency. So, yeah.
Can I jump in there also, please? Just wanted to add that less than half of our veterans take advantage of the VA resources and services. And that's another big challenge. It's trying to convince and to really refer our veterans into the system. Again, once they receive those services, for those that qualify, those are free services, or they're limited in terms of payment. Also, the medication that they receive is free. So it's not as much of a financial issue for those veterans that qualify in that particular case. Again, I think those other factors come into play about why aren't they taking advantage of the VA resources that are there. And many of those resources at the VA are, obviously purposely designed to meet the challenges and needs and the unique characteristics of the veteran population.
This has to be said, just so we all are on the same sheet of music. The issue we're dealing with at the federal level is that the VA doesn't really market its services, doesn't go out of its way to tell people what it offers. I tell everyone, how is it that, almost everybody in this room knows what USAA is and who USAA is, yet we have people who've served our nation who really don't know what's available to them on the VA side. It's a public policy situation where they have the second largest budget in all the federal government, yet they serve roughly a third at best of all whom they can serve. If I serve more people, it's going to cost more money, and so there's institutional pressure on me to not cost more. And so I think that that's not saying anything on the good people who work there. It's saying things on a larger, do we as a nation want to really pay the cost to be right by these men and women who've served? And so because of that, we at the city level and our friends at the state level and our VSO friends often are filling this gap to try to get the word out to folks so we can try to be able to have them take advantage of things that are earned benefits. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what you're hitting upon is a challenge across the board with folks who are dealing with a lot of the mental health substance abuse issues. And actually, that's a perfect segue to my next question, because I just wanted to know how it has been, because I know that you had cited a few times in your testimony that you're partnering with different agencies like DOHMH, and also what does your partnership with OCMH look like? Because I know that OCMH was, has a certain budget, and some of it I was told or informed is to be used for things like, public service announcements or advertising. And so just wondering how that, if there's a way to collaborate, or if you guys already are collaborating, if you could talk about that a bit more.
So, Chair Lee, I'll say a little bit and I'll throw to Dr. DeMello from our team and Assistant Commissioner Gree to let them get into it. For us, a sea change was us being moved as an agency from falling under the special initiatives line as far as in the mayoral hierarchy to falling under Deputy Mayor Ann Williams Isom in the Health and Human Services line. So now it's an easier and just a more direct relationship with all who do work in the services space. So at the principal level, there's constant interaction between me and those other agency heads. Just want to call that out. I want to throw to Dr. DeMello as far as other things when it comes to coordination and to AC Greeley. So, yeah.
Lauren, do you want to talk?
There you go.
Sorry. Do you want to speak about the partnerships with OCMH first?
Yeah, the question was about other areas of coordination between us and city agencies and other things we're doing to collaborate on mental health and veterans concerns.
Yeah, more in particular OCMH as well as DOHMH.
Yeah. I'll start off in that OCMH is the reason we do the GAT-7 and PHQ-9, Madam Chair. They were the group that got us into that. They also the group that helped us design Mission Vet Check, that buddy check program I mentioned, which is us going on offense and constantly calling our people so we keep the touches with them. So when it comes to OCMH, I'd argue those are two areas that we've partnered with them. What was the other one again? I'm sorry, ma'am. You said it was OCMH and DOHMH, I want to, I'll say one thing on this and then just open it up. I know that we have had participation from folks from DOHMH within our Veteran Mental Health Coalition and as part of our crisis intercept mapping work. I know that we've had representatives from the Department of Health, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene there. Also, we've been very grateful to DOHMH for giving us better clarity and visibility on what the veteran suicide data is in this city. Most recent data is that from 2017 to 2019, it was 65 of our veterans died by suicide. And so when you look at 16.8 per day nationally, and you look at 21.7 per year for us, we believe that our numbers are much lower here in New York City compared to other places due to a lot of the gun laws here. And so we're just grateful for that. And just anything else that I'd add, you want to say on this, as far as the veterans relationship, anything, Lauren, you want to add too? So, yeah.
Sure, I can add a little bit. Good morning. Thanks for having this hearing and calling attention to this issue. In addition to the data that we're sharing regarding suicide, which we track closely and which crisis hotline, 988, which of course, if anybody dials, the first option, press 1 for specialty veteran services. So it's critical to have that resource available to anybody who can elect to get the specialty crisis counseling for veterans, but many people will not choose that, right? As we're hearing, there are vets who choose not to get their services in veteran-specific settings, and they can continue on to the general 988 crisis counselors, where they'll receive generalist counseling, in the moment emotional support, and then connection to local services, and another opportunity for them to get connected to specialty veteran services that will come up in the course of making a referral. The counselor will ask about that. It factors into benefits and other services rendered. And we still find people may not choose, veterans may not choose those specialty services and will continue to be served in our more general mental health care system. We also have some supportive housing units that we partner with community-based organizations to provide specialty supportive housing for veterans, about 500 veterans in our supportive housing citywide. Half of those units are specialty. So again, this sort of theme of both specialized services for people who opt into that and then making it available more generally for people who don't.
And I want to be sure to give them roses too, in that the work I mentioned on 1115 waiver, that was us reaching out to DOHMH to get a read on how to navigate this. So as we're pursuing that, it was largely due to Commissioner Vassan and his team to kind of guide us as we're looking to get that right. So yeah.
Nice.
We're also very welcoming of the Dwyer money that's being transferred over from DOHMH, from the state OMH to DOHMH to us, and we're really grateful for that funding.
Chair Lee, I'll just jump in. Like, interagency assistance is so critical, especially when you have an agency like DVS, which is the smallest agency in the city. So we can't do it all alone. So when we work with our sister agencies, it's so important because there's different resources, different staff. And I'll give you a simple, right? We always talk about the largest demographic of veterans are seniors. So you would bring in DFTA, Department for the Aging, in the back of your head. They created this great new group called CONY, Cabinet for Older New Yorkers. They recently added DVS to that to bring the veteran perspective to Older New Yorker Cabinet, which has been tremendous, because now all of a sudden we're able to have this conversation with every agency on what they're doing for older New Yorkers, and then we can come in and say, what about veteran New Yorkers? So it's a conversation that is starting to take roots in not only just with the administration, with the other agencies to say, okay, how do we bring veterans to this conversation? So we appreciate the question. Lauren, I don't know if you had anything else to add on that, but you're so important on managing those relationships.
Yeah, so we utilize different agencies in different ways. For example, we have a partnership with DOC where we have a specific coordinator that outreaches incarcerated veterans, and upon their release, we connect them to services so that they are provided with those services seamlessly. We engage them prior, we do an intake, we do an assessment, we gather their documents, so upon their release, everything is set. And it's easier for them to integrate into society. So we have projects with DOC. We have trainings that come, including the mental health first aid for DOHMH. Of course, our partnership with Department of Education. We have Get Covered NYC, where we work with the PEU mayor's office. So we have different partnerships, where we try to engage veterans, to provide services and also access them to healthcare.
Thank you. Actually, you answered one of my other questions about your partnership with DOC, so thank you for answering that. And yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the whole whole government approach and breaking down the silos between agencies, because you go in through, like, I'm a whole person, but I have to walk through one agency to get this service and another agency to get this service and then, if they're not coordinating or talking to each other, it becomes more difficult. So it's good to hear that with the veterans, you guys are coordinating a lot with the different agencies, which is good to know. I'm just gonna ask one last question before I turn over to my colleagues, because I don't want you guys to keep hearing my voice all the time, and I'll come back to questions later. But really quickly, for New York City Well, if a veteran calls and identifies, and we're able to find out and identify that they're a veteran, is the process different when a veteran calls and reaches out at New York City Well versus someone else, for example? Or, I don't know if, yeah.
I can take that, sure. So the federal government launched 988 last July. We had a 13-month transition period where we had the 2 phone numbers live into the same local call center. The NYC Well brand we're sunsetting, so it's now 988, so I'll use that language in my response to you. And so when anybody calls 988, they hear an option for Spanish, and then in English they can press 1 to get connected to the Veterans Crisis Line. Which will again give them those specialty services. If they then, if they don't choose that, they continue into general 988 crisis counselors with the city-held contract for our local call center, and they get general emotional support, more generalized emotional support and connection to local resources if they want that.
That's good to know. We should promote that more, because I didn't
Yeah.
realize. When is New York City Well sunsetting?
So we're not advertising the brand anymore proactively. The calls will still forward into 988, but we're keeping the number live for a while. We don't want to leave anybody hanging, obviously. And so, but as of September 1st, we're like not using that number publicly and sticking with 988 exclusively. But that has been a reality for the last 13 months. People have been calling into the same trained counselors. So I just want to assure folks that the services are really consistent. It's just we're going with the simpler, easier to remember federal number.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And I just want to recognize we've been joined by Councilmember Mealy. And with that, we'll hand it over to Councilmember Abreu to ask questions.
Thank you so much, chairs, for your testimony, and thank you, Holden, for that powerful testimony as well. Regarding PTSD treatment models, I wanted to ask a question about animal-assisted therapy. The US VA 2015 Healthcare Analysis Information Group survey found that 52% of VA healthcare systems offer animal-assisted therapy for veterans, an increase from 25 in 2011. AAT uses animals such as dogs and horses to help military members and veterans recover from physical and mental health conditions. It's quite impressive what animals can do. Dogs, for instance, can be trained to perform specific tasks, such as waking an individual suffering from PTSD from nightmares, interrupting moments of anxiety by nudging, pawing, or leaning, providing calm and comfort by laying on top of the individual, blocking or creating space for an individual by positioning their bodies in front of them or behind, and bringing medication. My question is, how widely utilized is this form of treatment among veterans in New York City?
Thank you so much for that question, Councilmember Abreu. I have to get back to as far as exact data on that, as far as, who is using those things. I know that we will put a future veteran, military, and community family survey out. That may be another way we can try to get at that too, just to get a handle on it, because it may not be just, we can ask our friends at the VA to share as much as they are able with. That my good friend Ed Schloman will be testifying later today, who part of his nonprofit, Operation Warrior Shield, has an effort called Operation Canine Companion. So he may be able to answer more on that, but we'll do what we can to try to get as best information we're able to get to you on that.
Okay, so would that also apply for, in terms of the number of AT programs in the city, that's also a question for them as well?
We've got to do our homework and just get an idea of it. We know of certain groups, like we mentioned that one of our Dwyer fundees is doing equine therapy as an example. I just mentioned Operation Canine Companion, but I think we've got to go back to the drawing board to get that answer to you and just, survey our community, get an idea of how many partners there are and how many veterans are using it.
No problem. Just want to
May I offer that the VA gives out grant money for adaptive sports, and there's several New York-based organizations that receive that funding, particularly to do equine therapy. So that's one source.
Thank you. I mean, look, AAT is. Thank you. I mean, look, AAT is very important. Animals serve so many important purposes. Thank you so much.
Well, Councilmember Breo, it's a great point to think out of the box of, well, what alternative methods are available, and then how can they be applicable in my district? So with the equine therapy, they'll take veterans from the 5 boroughs and give them a day of peace with the horses in New Jersey, that when you see the program, and Commissioner Hendon goes firsthand, and see the special bond, and for one day in their life, they are with the horse and they're getting this critical treatment, but it costs money. So one of the things last year that almost passed was the Veterans Initiative and the council. For example, you could take that money veterans in your district can benefit from that program. But as always, everything's a budget. But that's a good way to use initiative funding in any way you seem fit for veteran needs in your particular district. And that's why I always like the open-ended initiatives like that, so that each council member can direct where those funds could be best used in your VSOs, in your treatment plans, in the court systems, anywhere that because every district is so different. Like in my old district, it was the highest amount of veterans in the city. Veterans are such a big component in Councilmember Palladino office, always have veterans coming in and out, that the more you can take an active role with that within your own, it becomes such an additional resource to then get, like how we started today, of identifying veterans and then how we can get the different help. And in today's testimony on mental health, it's so important to look at these extra forms of therapy, what works best, find out from the veteran groups that are really working with it, and then how can we expand on it. And it's not really a lot of money that's involved. It's more along the lines of connecting the best service to the district and how those veterans get back to you and say, you know what, that worked, this didn't work, I love this program. I got beeped on my own. But that's just to give you, like, we're listening to Commissioner and Ellen and Linda and Lauren DeMilla all the time. That's the hardest part, is recognizing there are these groups, but then how do we as a city then bring our vets to these groups that are doing this critical work and expanding it? A lot of it is just a little bit of funding, but more of it is connecting the dots.
I have to piggyback on
Thank you
Paul.
so much.
The 1-2 punch to here, Councilman, also is the fact that we are working to share our data with you. So between you having the resources to do it and also knowing who your veterans are, we hope that that'll be enough to kind of get us to a better place here so you can help more of your constituents who are veterans access these opportunities.
I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Great, thank you. And next, Councilmember Palladino.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you for coming. As Paul has pointed out, my office is really, really busy. I just want to bring up something that I wanted to connect with Tanya about because as I was sitting here. Something that came up this week was we were looking into, we have a lot of veterans that come in, and it's more about the families and those that help, you know, the survivors of the mental illness that they're suffering. What can we do, and what is being done as far as the veteran services go for the families and for those that need help other than the veterans themselves? What kind of outreach are we doing for the family members that have to take care of these veterans? That's one question. The other thing is also our veterans need jobs, and they're searching for them. A lot of them, like you say, are older now, and some of them are not, and they need employment. and they're finding it very, very difficult to find jobs. The other thing is, sitting here on the Veterans Committee now for 20 months, we come back to the same thing all the time, and it's all about the outreach. How do we, we go over this again and again and again. The numbers don't grow exponentially for those who want and need help. They just don't, because they're not being reached. Now, in our American Legion Hall, post 131 down on Clintonville Street, it's a very interesting dynamic because it's much older men, Vietnam War, late 70s and such. And then there's a 37-year-old female Navy veteran who suffered with alcoholism. I know her personally, suffered with alcoholism. And I said, why don't you go down to the American Legion? Well, in the last year she's been going down. She doesn't drink anymore, she kicked it, and that was after years. So this is just a very, you know how small that Legion Hall is. I mean, it's large in size, but small in membership. And what they were able to do for her was tremendous. But it was just simple outreach, going to the American Legion Hall, talking to people who had something in common with her, and just camaraderie, even though the age difference was so vast. But happy to say she's doing all right. She goes there every Saturday morning. She participates in whatever little activities that they do. Then they do try to host a dance. I'm curious, when you went to, where'd you go this week? You said there was a meeting?
Fordham University, they had a veterans mental health.
How was that turnout? I'm very curious about, did you have a lot of people there?
For the summit, for the segment that the panel that we led had about 25, 30 people there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about it on the grander scale, on what we have going on, that nobody's saying they have a problem, 30 people is nothing. It's very discouraging. And again, going back to the original thing, I want to help as much as I possibly can to get out the word. Bob brought up a good point, something simple like that billboard. 988 is a very simple number, but there's other things too that we need to do, and I don't think the budget, of course, is there for it, because you've heard me say it many times about getting something out in an infomercial or, on the TV or on a radio where they know. It's not just, there is so much here for them. It's incredible, the resources that are available to our veterans, and yet they still don't know. So our American Legion hosts maybe 10 or 15, and yet my office is filled every other Wednesday with people that come from all over the city about different things, needing jobs, help for the caregivers of these people. So these are just different avenues, and I know Tanya and everybody's doing the best they can, but letting people know more so how we could get out there, this message is vital. I don't know what else to say. I just don't, because it's 20 months.
Councilwoman Palladino, just to mention to you, the National Association of Mentally Ill, NAMI, has several chapters. I know there's certainly one in Staten Island and one for New York City, and they do quite a bit of support work with family members, and we're often promoting a lot of their programs, just to give you a reference and a resource for that.
I'm more about letting people know what the resources are. Like you said earlier, you said the shame of it is we're not reaching enough people. And that's the truth. They're not self-identifying, and as Commissioner said, for every one, there's 3 in the shadows, and that's very true. I'm just trying to figure out how we could get them to come forward. And a lot of them, it's just simplistic things. Housing, that's easy. We could figure this all out. There's agencies that are coming together, and this can all work if enough people know about it. I'm a little frustrated. I just don't know now what to do about that. Thank
With
you.
respect to jobs, we do have a search engine called Vet Connect Pro, and if your constituent needs assistance with a resume writing, we also have resources for that on top of helping them search for jobs. It's a veteran based
I'm
search
sure
engine.
Tanya knows about that.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Just to give you the heads up. Yep.
And I'll be remiss if I didn't call out our partners at Small Business Services has their Priority One effort. So as a part of Workforce One, they've got a team of about 8 specialists who work with veterans who are looking to seek jobs. They get about 5,000 who come to them who are looking through that each year, and about 2,500 or so get placed. And so that's SBS. For those with disabilities, the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities has NYC at Work as another platform too for looking for folks who are sensitive, who are open to hiring. Yeah, and it's information's out for us. We put that on nyc.gov/vetjobs. Caregiver information is on nyc.gov/vetcaregivers. It still goes back to the tree falls in the woods and no one hears it. Did it fall? That's really where we are. And so for us, a lot of it is how do we? I mentioned how we're working with the council. We're hoping that you all have our information. We're doing this with all the different electeds, so not just a council member, but an assembly member in New York State, a state senator in New York City, a federal elected in New York City will know what we know as far as vets. So we can keep, if we have these constant touches, where you got me touching, you touching, other electeds touching, if we've got other agencies touching, that at some point the dam will break and someone will say, let me reach out. And then I have to say this piece, what's so tricky here too is it's not, leading with mental health is important to kind of put that on the table. At the same time, it could be that you were talking with someone about claims, or about housing,
Right.
or about employment, and things came up. You know, and so so we've got to make the relationship, form the relationship, and then just constantly communicate what's out there. And at some point, step 1 may be, I went to this job fair. Step 3 may be, I think I need to talk to somebody and get some help. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember, those relationships are so important, and finding out, when you mentioned about jobs, my head clicked and said, well, who's giving the most jobs to veterans in New York City, and how can we work with them? How can we spread that good word? Because again, if we don't have the resource, what employers out there are doing the right thing? And you'd be surprised, there are, from Helmet to Hard Hats, Tunnel for Towers, and Northwell Health is the largest employer of veterans. Now all of a sudden, you're having that conversation, and we can bring the list of veterans that are looking for work or looking for transitional services and housing to the groups that are doing it. And that's why it was so important to create DVS in the first place, so that you have an agency now that can be that conduit. And Lauren and Ellen and the commissioner was saying how those are growing. And the more we can combine, for example, even our own city agencies, Office of Labor Relations, the commissioner and I started an event that now celebrates veterans in our own city workforce. So again, you have to identify them, then you have to bring them, then you have to say, and then you can say, what was your journey? How did you go from being in the armed forces to working in the city, and tell that story to other veterans who are coming out or having difficulty. So it's happening, but the more that we do have these hearings and do have these conversations, it does, then all of a sudden people are at the panels, and then people are coming up saying, oh, I just employed, how can I employ more veterans? How can I get veterans housing? How can I include them in my development that's being rezoned in my district? Chair Lee was just talking about Creedmoor facility, and I said, well, we could bring veterans in there and create a whole complex for services and mental health treatment and transitional affordable housing. And all of a sudden the community kind of likes that, because they know that veterans are being part of this project, and there's a little less resentment toward the project because veterans are part of it. So, I mean, that's how the council members have tremendous impact on where veterans become part of the conversation.
Thank you.
We have all of this. I want the veterans to come. That's the
the biggest
issue.
challenge.
Getting our guys and girls out there to actually use these fantastic things that we have available to them. That I think is the most frustrating thing for me, because we're watching our veterans age out. Meanwhile, there's so many in their 30s, in their 40s that do need this, and yet as savvy as they are, technologically, they just cannot maneuver their ways around it. They don't want to identify. I'm trying to figure out, what is the stigma? What is the problem with these younger people, 30s, 40s, 50s, not stepping up and saying. Because to only have 34 people, a lot of them are Vietnam vets. You know, they're older people. I want to try, because we have so many resources, you have so many resources, I want to know what we could do to get them involved. What do we need to promote these resources so that they know that they're out there?
I don't know about
And then
resources.
this could be a huge success.
I don't know about tremendous resources, but definitely partners. We'd always love to have more resources. But we
Yeah,
usually find
actually,
them
I
in
was
the
going,
hands.
which leads me to, which I didn't want to go there, but.
Why not?
Go ahead. The state money that you see, how much is the state money that you see for your budget?
Ellen on the Dwyer
Yeah.
funding, yeah.
Yeah, this is the Dwyer program. We have roughly about $800,000 from over various fiscal years, and we're in the midst of trying to roll out the money. We've been involved with, we're issuing a concept paper for the Dwyer program, which will be followed by a request for proposal. We are currently using some of that money for piloting the Dwyer program, and we are currently operating 4 programs, a different one in each borough, working very closely with the American Legion.
I want to clarify that statement.
Yeah, please.
I want to clarify that. So
Right.
it's 150 that we received for FY22, and it's to be 400 for the following fiscal years. This is where
$150,000?
yes, 150,000
That's
from
it?
the correct, and so that's through the Joseph P. Dwyer program. That's a program where communities across the state are receiving money from directed through the mental health vertical of the state government to help reach out to veterans. And so for New York City, it's 150 for FY22, it's 400 for FY23, and it'll be 400
It can't be more than that.
feeds into our person
Sure, it
pays
can't be
for
more than
that feeds
that.
into our person
Sure, it
pays
can't be
for
more than
that feeds
that.
into our personnel costs, and so that's a part of money that the state sends to each of the counties.
'22, '23, and '24. Wow, I just love what I'm hearing. How involved are our assembly?
City versus state argument always, right, on funding for veterans. So it's,
And I just have to say, I think our emphasis has really been on, how can we work together? Can we work together? We've also signed that agreement with the Assembly as well, where all the New York State Assembly presidents, so that the agreement with the borough presidents will allow that each borough president will have their veterans' contact info, and that extends to community. It's one
afterwards, but I just, because there's a couple more council members that are waiting to ask questions as well, but we can come back to you. So we have Councilmember Hanif next, followed by Councilmember Mealy.
Thank you so much, chairs, and thank you all for your commitment. And it's just been an honor to hear about the scale and scope of services and issues. I want to return to an peer coordinators do, and is 3 a sufficient amount of staffing?
I thank you for that question, Councilmember Hanif. So we have, one of our charter mandated areas is to focus on housing. And so those coordinators focus on veterans who are in need of emergency or supportive housing, folks who are in the shelter system or just coming out of the shelter system. And so within our team, our housing and support services vertical, that's what those 3 veteran peer coordinators are focused on. When it comes to other efforts, I'm defer to Lauren, to Ellen, we often will partner with other groups that have their own veteran peer coordination, arms or initiatives and things like that. But speaking for us, it's very much a strong focus on this person is currently in the shelter system and we need to get them to that next level. Let's put them in touch with a VPC.
That's great to know. And could you also share if that transition from shelter into supportive housing, how challenging is it? Because I know that many veterans don't have IDs, and IDs inherently prohibit many New Yorkers, and especially veterans, from access to these vital components such as housing, work, and even other IDs.
I'll let Lauren and Ellen chime in. When I think about supportive housing, the issue for us is to obtain enough stock that is specific supportive of our veterans. So working to have more housing erected for our veterans. And so we tie in heavily with there's the HHAP program at the state for providing capital for a nonprofit looking to develop supportive housing, where there's $5 million of the $128 million that's annually carved out that's set aside for those looking to develop veteran supportive housing. Also, there's the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, which is to provide services money. So if I'm looking to set something up where I want to provide services in supportive housing for veterans, that what we will often do is provide a letter of support for someone's application, provided that we go through the right city traps and get the right approvals. So we'll write a support letter that is accompanied in that developer's application. Also, we will have something that we send to the working groups at the state so they know, hey, look, we really advocate for these groups. When I first came in the job just before COVID, did a survey of the various supportive housing opportunities or developments that are here, we learned that there was little churn for those that are veteran specific. And we think about great partners like Volunteers of America or Service for the Other Serves or SUS or the Jericho Project, et cetera, or Help USA, that we needed to build more as far as things that are more veteran specific, and so that's where we've been focused like a laser. Right now, the pipeline of projects that have been approved through our advocacy, as far as us saying, look, here's our support letter for you, ESHA applicant or HHAP applicant, we know that there are more than 250 units that are in the pipeline to be developed, similar to a project many of us know called Surf Vets out in Coney Island. And so for us, when I think of supportive housing for veterans, I'm thinking of how do we make sure that more of this housing is built so that our brothers and sisters can have a place to stay.
And is there a goal that DVS outlines for how many supportive housing per year you're trying to ensure are getting built?
I'll answer it a different way.
Okay.
The point-in-time count numbers, most recently available numbers, 482 veterans were in the shelter system as of the 2022 point-in-time count. 8 were street homeless, and then the remaining 474 were in the shelter system. For us, functional zero is a number that's less than 400. And so for us, it's how can we build enough supportive housing between those programs, also between working with VASH, or Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing, which is a different effort that's subsidized through the Department of VA and HUD. How do we have enough of this built to be able to get to that and stay below that at all times? And so we've been having regular meetings with NYCHA, with HPD, and with the VA on this front as far as being lockstep and how do we get to a good place on this.
That's great to know. And one final piece I have on just understanding the barriers to receiving care is, could you speak more directly about women veterans and what kinds of services are available to women specifically? I know women present unique challenges in this conversation, and would like to hear a little bit more about what women's specific barriers are and how DVS is really addressing women's needs?
I think for us, when we think about women's needs, a lot of it comes to Veterans Health Administration and how the health footprint for the VA presents itself as far as being welcoming to women veterans. We know that women veterans is the largest, fastest growing demographic within the veteran community. So a lot of it is having more specific, capital footprint. There was an act that was passed recently called the Deborah Sampson Act, where the VA is increasing its investment and having facilities that are specific to women and having services specific to women. We also know our friends at the James, 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 our friends at the James.
I'll be very quick. You said the one punch, two punch about the therapy. Do y'all have a database where if elected officials want to put some money in and say, I want my veterans in my district to go horseback riding, a pet and zoo, anything therapeutic that would help our veterans with stress? You said one day. I may want, because that I could say this veteran in my district, he probably just want to go fishing, and that would be therapeutic for him. So
I'd go with them too.
exactly. So just quickly, because I got some other stuff.
That's a great question. I'll defer to Ellen to add. Great question. I'll defer to Ellen to add.
Sierra Club runs that. We're certainly familiar. We're really trying to develop our program for the Dwyer program, and I know that there is. I haven't gotten a fishing group. Aware of a sailing group that is interested in applying for funding. So we're really excited about the Dwyer program. Obviously, we'd be opening it up to all veterans across all the 5 boroughs. But if you are specifically interested, we'd be happy to work with you and put you in touch with these organizations.
Thank you. You could put me on your list. That's good.
Okay.
And Commissioner, you said out of the shadows. What steps are being taken to reduce the stigma that veterans feel are associated with seeking treatment for mental or behavioral health conditions?
Yeah, Bush.
I want to let Lauren take lead in answering that. As far as I have some thoughts, but I don't want to let our executive director for care coordination and mental health speak to that. So yeah.
So one of the things that we do is we counsel each veteran that calls DVS, and we counsel them that communication. We let them know that they won't be judged for their services. Their employers can't outreach us and find out, and I think that really alleviates some of the burden of some of the stigma that, who's finding out about my treatment? How are they going to judge me? How will that affect my life? So that's one thing that we do on a personal one-to-one basis.
One-on-one basis? Because some people have a full-time job and may need the services, but then if they go to a mental health veteran, it can jeopardize their job. So I was just saying, what protocol you have that can shield them health while you having a full-time job. And so we could talk about that next one. I got something else.
And something we also tell people too, I just want to add too that a lot of times it's that I'm worried about my employer taking certain steps against me too on account of being veterans. So for that, we always, we try to counsel people on the city's human rights laws on this stuff.
Okay.
And counsel them on USERRA for folks who worry about employment things. And so a lot of the information is at nyc.gov/vetrights too, as far as that. When we get to that discussion, we say, hey, look, here, know what your rights are. You are protected in these ways, but we have that stuff listed on nyc.gov/vetrights. Madam Councilwoman, sorry.
That's important. You say that
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add in that one of our missions is really to kind of create military cultural competency for institutions to get a better handle and understanding of what it is what it is to be a veteran. And I think that would also help to alleviate some of the pressures and destigmatize what is also going on in the workplace.
that's good. And my pet peeve, you say SB and the city was supposed to have vendor license for veterans. How at least about 3% of veterans with their vendor's license where they're being bullied. The city is doing about that, and the veterans. I'm a part of it. If you could help me, I will.
I know the last discussion we had was about a week ago. I think it was last week or so. We had Robert Belkabir, who's one of the leaders in that community of street vendors. And the key issue with it is there are state laws that allow for veterans to do certain vending, that supersede city laws. And so last discussion I had with him, he said he had positive conversations with the Department of Sanitation on this as far as trying to break through and get to a point where also Oath, I have to give them favor too, because Oath has gone and said, look, we want to look any of these situations where someone did have a fine or something like that, if it's a situation where it would have a fine or something like that, if it's a situation where it would November 1st at the municipal building. And so we are, things are moving in the right direction there when it comes to people respecting the state laws for vendors. And I want to give credit to Chair Holden for that. Because
Yes.
It was introductions that came from Chair Holden's team that Rob was able to take advantage of. And he was the first to say, hey, I'm really grateful for the chair for helping make these connections so I can go and do X, Y, and Z. So I understand things are moving in the right direction.
Yes, that's good. Why it seemed like my time went by so quick?
Oh.
But I want to thank our chair in regards to, I would love to be at that meeting because I'm still getting the letters from the street vendors, and it's very sad. They really, that's keeping their sanity, making their own money, but it was really put in place for them, and somehow or another, groups have taken it over.
Councilmember
and we
Mealy,
spoke about it.
it's always good to see you, and I'm
Same.
glad you brought that up. A lot of the bills that come forward sometimes forget there's statutory protections for protected classes. The disabled veterans vending issue is always in that part. So as Albany looks to expand vendor licenses, their bills did not have the protection for the disabled vendors. And that's where our role comes in and say, hey, don't forget, as you're expanding license, we have a protected class. So the commissioner and I and a team and the small group that we have are always focused on how to protect that very unprotected group, especially when they took away enforcement from the NYPD, because God forbid the NYPD does enforcement. We don't want that. So we had to find other ways to do that. Now sanitation's taken over, so it's a lot of process, and I find the best way to handle it, say we're talking about Times Square, right? Times Square is always a hot issue, in front of the public libraries or at the parks, is to work with that actual alliance, whether it's the Times Square Alliance, with the local police precinct, with the sanitation that's assigned to that area, bring in the disabled vendors and have the conversation and say, here's Frank, here's Joe, here's Susan, they have licenses, they're here every day, make sure they're protected, they're not pushed out by other unlicensed vendors, and they have the voice to say, here I am, don't miss me. And that's been a tremendous help, but it's always a daily.
It's always, and it's very delicate.
very delicate.
So I'm looking forward.
Appreciate it.
We owe you a response on what's going on this, but I know that the sanitation and that oath have both really shown a lot of favor to the situation now that they understand it, so that we pray this won't be something that keeps coming up, that this will be.
Vendor license to make sure, because some of them are not using it now because they don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get hurt. And new vendors are coming up. They're not getting summonses, but soon as a vet come on a corner and they have their license, for somehow or another, they get ran off, and people with no vendor's license at all do not get bothered. So, Chair, that's
hearing and make sure that all the agencies involved respect the veterans and they get certainly the
I got to acknowledge it was Craig Caruana on the chair's team who made some connections that were instrumental in this getting in its right place, just to call that out. So, yeah.
Our nurse has joined us. Do you have any questions? Okay. You want it? For veterans, let's talk about that. We mentioned the animal-assisted therapy already, but there are several others, and I just want to bring up. Can you tell us, the feelings, whether DVS or DOH, MH,
I want to acknowledge someone who will speak soon as far as the prior commissioner for DVS, Dr. Lori Sutton, who's really RTM, or Reconciliation Traumatic Memories Protocol. Our awareness of it goes so far as helping to facilitate training of professionals in that space during the time just prior to the pandemic, as far as just trying to get more folks.
We're in support of any sort of treatment that has a strong evidence base, and I think there's a growing evidence base for RTM, as well as other more creative and cutting-edge treatments for PTSD. Make sure is available to treatment providers across the city.
and we're going to hear about the RTM a treatment that could be done, I think, within 5 sessions. It's very quick. In 5 sessions, it's very quick. In 5 sessions, it's very quick. In 5 sessions, it's very quick. And it's worth trying. It's at least on the city level. to me, especially what I've heard about RTM. I don't know too much about psychedelic-assisted therapy, but I'm sure that we try anything that can work, because we haven't done enough, like I mentioned before. Just some questions on from the administration, the Kendra's law that requires each county in New York State to establish local assisted outpatient Okay, because the last administration wasn't too keen on it. I just want to let you know that we didn't. I just want to. I always like to do. Far beyond the veterans, but we really need to really use that law.
Not the administration's in support of it for Councilmember Hudson's bill.
The Health Department supports the intent of this bill. Obviously, access to mental health supports and services is vitally important. We would not be the implementing agency. We don't have a role, establishing staff roles in other city agencies.
Okay, thank you. Back to the chair.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Palladino or anyone else, did you guys have second round questions or? Okay. All right. With that, I think I'm going to turn it back to Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, members of the administration. We will now move to testimony from the public. I will call up individuals in panels, and all testimony will be limited to about 4 minutes. I'd like to note that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by us, the committee staff, may be submitted up to 72 hours after the closing of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.newyorkcity.gov. Our first panel will be a mixed panel between in-person and Zoom participants. For the in-person, we have Michael Moreno and Lori Sutton. And then on Zoom, we'll have Megan Bork and retired Chief Master Sergeant Edward Schulman. We'll begin with the in-person folks once they get situated. Thank you.
Sorry, and just as a commissioner and your team and DOHMH folks leave, thank you so much again for all the information, and definitely look forward to having more conversations, so thank you.
Lori, when you're ready, you may begin.
Chair Lee, Chair Holden, distinguished members of the Committee on Mental Health, Disabilities, and Addiction, and the Committee on Veterans, Commissioner Hendon, honorable civic officials, community leaders, advocates, caregivers, survivors, fellow veterans, Blue and Gold Star family. Thank you all for being here and for your leadership and commitment to making New York City a place where there is space and grace, a place where there is space and grace. To lead off in this panel, my testimony will be followed by Dr. Frank Burke, the creator of the RTM protocol, who will be testifying remotely, My battle buddy in person, Mike, and I serve as fellow foundation board members for the Chapter 126, Viet 26, Viet 26, Viet 26, Viet. And I regret to say that our fifth panel member, Dr. Rachel, most distinguished, preeminent researchers, clinical experts in the field of PTSD, who has recently opened up a center for psychedelic psychotherapy and trauma, as well as her work for years now at the Bronx VA. Her request to testify this morning was denied by the VA. Today we gather to address and act on critical issues affecting the most active and informed voice for those who are afraid or unable to speak. To illuminate places within of darkness and despair, to boldly break through the blockades of bureaucracy, to advance vanguard values, social innovation, equitable access, community advocacy, scientific knowledge, clinical practice, and relevant outcomes. Of a mental health coordinator to assist and perform outreach for city employees, and number 0946, requiring the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to report referrals, filed petitions, and the number of resulting court orders for individuals to assisted outpatient treatment programs under the state law known as Kendra's Law. It's beyond time to make these changes to New York City local law. I also heartily endorse making November Veterans Appreciation Month. Regarding the topic of today's hearing, advancing as a retired military psychiatrist, finding ways to address PTSD more effectively is my life's work. Tackling the tide of suffering, despair, addiction, and suicide, and promoting growth, resilience, initiative, and trust. There is no greater privilege. Throughout today's hearing, we will collectively witness the trauma tsunami of suffering upon us. Face the facts, listen to stories of strength, learn of scientific progress, myriad services, and burgeoning programs, and rally around recollections of recovery. Yet important questions remain. Where do we go from here? What can we do? What should we do? What must we do? Daunting. But let's simplify with 10 things to stemming only from the horrors of combat, assault, motor vehicle accidents, rape, torture, incest, experience, and injury, which can lead to PTSD. Breakthrough treatments offer real hope, fostering the potential to catalyze post-traumatic is often accompanied by sleep disruption, pain, whether it's physical, emotional, tragically, all too often deaths of despair, suicide, drug overdose, and alcoholism. Suicide, drug overdose, and alcoholism. Dollars spent since 9/11. The current, quote, gold standard treatments are failing miserably to meet this moment in which so many are struggling to survive. Struggling to survive. 6, tell me this. If veterans Number 4, if passionately for psychedelics. Number 3, a growing chorus of researchers, clinicians, veterans, family members, survivors, caregivers, and allies are calling for real progress in advancing the innovation of breakthrough PTSD treatments, including we respond to this clarion call to action. Number 2, PTSD is real. Breakthrough treatments like transcendental meditation, reconsolidation of traumatic memories, and MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, coming soon, really do work. Early intervention prevents needless suffering, yet trauma healing can occur decades later. And speaking up, reaching out, seeking support, and demanding change is real strength. Number 1, PTSD treatment is far too important to be left to the doctors, researchers, clinicians, elected and civic officials, philanthropists, and suffering individuals and their families. All of us must summon the courage, audacity, and outrage to demand better, to harness the fierce urgency of now. This concludes my formal testimony. I'm honored to engage in an ongoing dialogue today and going forward to address this vital need for bringing breakthrough PTSD treatments to New York City. And with that, I think we'll save Q&A for the on the panel agenda. Dr. Burke, are you with us?
We can move to Ms. Moreno, and then we can circle
that's
back.
Fine.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'll tell you, you're right here, Mike. Let's turn to Mike Moreno, my battle buddy.
I don't know about battle buddy. What do I gotta do here? Press that button in. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for having me here. I was going to speak about RTM and what it meant to me and what it did to me. I wrote it. RTM statement. So I'd like to pass out the original so you can read. If you want me to read along, read it or Okay, I'll read what I just handed out. My name is Mike Marino. I always said I'm a combat infantryman. I served as a rifleman with the 101st Airborne in the jungles of Vietnam's Ashore Valley in 1969. I say I am a combat infantryman instead of I was a combat infantryman, because once you have been in combat, the memories, especially the bad ones, stay with you forever. Shortly after being discharged from the Army, I started having nightmares and flashbacks. I became hypervigilant of my surroundings and avoided large gatherings. I trusted no one and withdrew socially from my friends and family members. I never discussed my time in Vietnam with anyone. It took over 20 years for my life to change so drastically. I had PTSD. For another 20 years, on and off, I had been in PTSD therapy, both with one-on-one counselors and in group sessions. These programs did not work for me. I believe that in the early days of PTSD treatment, an effective therapy was not yet developed and still has not improved much over the years. Finally, after almost 55 years, I found a therapy that has eliminated the demons I lived with all these years. It's called RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. RTM has a 90% documented success rate and can be completed in 5 hours over 3 weekly sessions. During my first RTM session, after discussing the PTSD symptoms that were causing me the most grief, I was asked to pick events from my combat experiences that troubled me the most, grading them from 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst. I chose an ambush firefight where my good friend was killed and I was wounded. In the second session, we went through several mental exercises where I reenacted the event in the third person. Me looking at myself, watching the event unfold. We did this several times. At the end of the session, I teared up. Changed to reenacting the event in the third person. To me, watching the event during the firefight as still images in a fast-running black and white slideshow. We did this several times, and by the end of the session, the ambush firefight event that was a 10, then a 3, is now a 0. The demons were gone. I could talk about this event without anxiety, the anxiety I had previously. The most astonishing thing is that other combat events I experienced have also gone to 0. I can't explain how this happened in 5 hours. I don't know how the brain works. I now feel that the heavy burden RTM for all Vietnam veterans, all my Vietnam War brothers and sisters, RTM works. For all veterans, RTM. I am back to becoming a better. It has been 6 months since I completed my RTM sessions for my PTS treatment. The demons that have been destroying my life for the last 50 years no flashbacks, not one. Loud noises like the 4th of July fireworks no longer sound like incoming mortar rounds. Just a boom followed by beautiful, colorful sparkles in the sky. I'm happier now. I'm more open. I'm looking to make contact with my old friends and meet new ones. I'm free from the demons. My new future, my new normal, started the day I completed my RTM therapy. Sometimes risking their own life. Their job was to stop the bleeding and relieve the pain. That is what our many times I have heard a medic wasn't. As they put him in a medevac helicopter to fly over to a field hospital to the world. That's healing. The second part of PTS treatment. After RTM, they may all need further counseling to stop alcoholism, drug abuse. Some may need help repairing a broken marriage or severed family relationship. Some may be homeless. Some need to secure skills for employment. The counselor's job does not end with RTM. It's the second phase. Don't just treat PTS symptoms, treat the whole person. PTSD is not just an effective therapy for veterans. We all know that. We have a PTSD epidemic. PTSD is prevalent among our first responders. Police officers see death every day. Firefighters risk their lives trying to save lives, sometimes in vain. Paramedics see dying accident victims every day. Hospital workers, from the janitorial staff to the doctors and nurses, have seen death firsthand during the pandemic. Now think of spousal abuse, parental, custodial, or stranger child abuse. How about the teenagers bullied and gang beaten? The rape victim, the mugging victim. They are all prime candidates for post-traumatic stress. They all have one thing in common. At one time or another, they thought that the demons would go away if they committed suicide. Everyone in this room has the ability, the capability to get together to create a comprehensive mental health program that would benefit those in desperate need, and most importantly, save lives. I'm a simple man, and I have a simple solution. I use it as an example. Opening up a business, opening up a store. We'll open an RTM store. What do we need? We need a location, office space. It's not a big deal, is it? Then we need our product. What is our product? Our product is counseling. Counselors, we have to hire counselors with RTM training and assign them have them go through the RTM protocol, them back into society where they can live. And next is to get the customers. Advertise like you normally do with all your. How about an app that's on their phone? When someone wants to get help, what do? They have to look for it. They have to find it. Where do I go? Even if they don't need help, they can't find it. Go to a website, you can get lost over there. You need an application on your phone. And this goes for all the district councils, where when you load the application, you have brief things about what's going on. Instead of them reaching into you, you're reaching out to them. This is going on today. We have a clinic here. We have veterans going over here. We have this in your community. You're reaching out to your audience. And then probably the second most important thing is continuous follow-up. Have you done this? How did you get a new job? Just to follow up.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much. That was very moving and very encouraging. That I just like your analogy about the app. That's interesting. And
I was talking it over with the communications director for Veteran Services, and I'm going to do a write-up and share with you some of my ideas on how to reach out to the public and your constituency rather than they reach out to you.
I just want to hear from Dr. Schulman. Is she, Dr. Schulman on the line?
I don't know. There's Dr. Bork. He may have dropped off. There's also Ed Schloman, president.
Ed Schulman? Oh, okay. Dr. Ed Schulman?
He's retired Command Master Sergeant Ed Schloman. He's president of Operation Warrior Shield. I can very quickly, they may have had to drop off, but is...
No, I'm here.
Oh, no, here's Ed, okay.
I've now been promoted from a Chief Master Sergeant to a doctor.
All right, that's good.
Well, to those who don't know me, my new friends here at the City Council, I'm a Marine Vietnam veteran who served our country for 28 years in uniform. And I've also seen this city council grow from a one-man unit of a budget of $100,000 to now a budget of $6 million with a highly motivated department under the leadership of Commissioner Jim Hendon. I also have been in the trenches here for 13 years promoting assistance to those suffering from post-traumatic stress. Also helping veterans are numerous not-for-profits to address the veterans' enemy, post-traumatic stress. These organizations grow each year as a result of a veteran suicide. They also grow when a wonderful young man or woman dies in service to our country and the family creates a foundation for their loved one's legacy. My point is that help is out there, but the problem is we're not reaching the people as we have discussed for the last 3 hours. We need to bring our story to them, and each of the 51 city council members need to help do that. We need to bring our story about transcendental meditation, and of course, you'll hear more from Dr. Frank Burke about RTM, something that I am endorsing quite a bit in the near future. My foundation, Operation Warrior Shield, is honored to have been an active partner with the David Lynch Foundation and to bring TM to our veteran community. Now, after 10 years of promoting TM, we can call it a major success. Call it a major success. Call it a major success. Our mayor has a program coming out soon, new TM. TM is out there, and 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 we at Operation Warrior Shield are proud clarity and resilience. RTM and ask that the New York City Council leadership to provide each of the 51 city council members a budget set aside for veterans, specifically to fund these two types of treatments, my companion canine companionship program. This way, all New York City Council members buy into the solution that could help end and not eliminate PTSD, but being able to live with it. I also hope that all of you can join me here in Brooklyn on October 28th, where we honor Mayor Adams, Commissioner White of NYPD, and two war heroes who served on Delta Force and Special SEAL Team 6 at the El Carib on October 28th. And I know Councilmember Holden is coming, and I do hope all of our 51 city council members show up that day and help eliminate PTSD from New York City veterans. Thank you. And I would love to take any questions.
Okay, we're gonna actually move to Dr. Burke first, and then we'll do it as a panel for a Q&A. Thank you.
Chair Holden, Chair Lee, distinguished members of the attending committees, and all of you present this afternoon for this important topic. I'm Dr. Frank Burke, a previous lecturer at Cornell University and a licensed clinical psychologist who was trained as a research scientist at the Institute of Psychiatry in London, sometime shortly after the dinosaurs ruled the earth. After 9/11, I went down to New York City to help. Over the 11 months post 9/11, I treated 250 survivors from above the 100th floor who had severe PTSD. The protocol that I was using proved extraordinarily clinically effective. After 9/11, like many of the volunteers who were down there walking through the dust and debris, I was diagnosed and treated for stage 4 cancer. 2 years later, I realized I had survived and could return to work. Simply said, with my background as a research psychologist, I knew that the protocol would have to be researched, published in peer-reviewed journals, and brought to recognition as evidentiary medicine in order to be gotten to those with PTSD who needed it. To that end, a group of old school Vietnam veterans and myself put together a nonprofit corporation that has, after 20 years of hard work, actually brought it to the point where it will very shortly be acknowledged as evidentiary medicine. There are roughly 27,000 veterans with PTSD in New York City, and 15 to 20% of the first responders like firefighters, police officers, EMTs, and correction officers who are going into work every day with PTSD debilitating symptoms. Most of us know some acquaintance, friend, or family member suffering with it. Our nonprofit is now in the process of gearing up to get this breakthrough PTSD treatment disseminated to the hundreds of thousands of people who need it. Again, simply said, while the field has spent billions of dollars researching multiple PTSD treatments with moderate results, the 4 RTM research studies completed thus far have shown RTM working 2 to 3 times better. This is not TV advertising. This is one of the breakthroughs in treatment for PTSD that we've needed for the last 50 years. We are seeking your help to make this and other new treatment options available to all who can benefit from them. I especially want to thank all of you for the time today and insights along with Mike Marino. For myself, above my desk here, I've had a sign up there for 10 years that says 22 today, when I know I'm sitting here with a real contribution to making that number smaller. Thank you, all of you, for your help with this, and I'll also make myself available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Burke, and for your great work. This sounds so great. I just have some logistic questions about how do we train personnel on certainly administering RTM. I mean, that seems to be, I think, the first thing we have to do. To get it out there, we need more trained clinicians. How long?
Chairman Holden.
Yes.
Well, we've got the protocol, what they call in the military, shovel ready, so that we can take, and we have been, we've trained over 300 licensed counselors to administer the protocol successfully, and we've measured that. And the training only takes 3 days. 3 days, and the way we do it, we don't certify someone to administer it until after they have successfully demonstrated that they can treat 2 PTSD diagnosed clients before and after, and we measure that. So that the protocol isn't just a research proven entity. We've got 300 counselors across the United States trained in using it successfully, and we're measuring that. We've also, by how shall I say, need, trained about 80 counselors now in the Ukraine who are using it, and we've got a waiting list of 200 counselors there in the Ukraine. As I was down at 9/11, when you're in a disaster area and you've got the numbers of PTSD in the population that are, for instance, in the Ukraine or like after Katrina, et cetera, the protocol is unbelievably effective and obvious in terms of its effectiveness.
So it sounds so exciting, and it doesn't seem that it would take a large financial investment to get this launched in you know, certainly New York City. It doesn't seem like. Have you estimated any costs of getting just the training part of it that we could look at? A breakdown?
More than that, Chairman Holden, I'll pass the answer to this across to General Sutton, who has put together a complete package of training and measurement of effectiveness over a 3-year period. Laurie, are you available to the phone here?
Thank you, Dr. Burke.
To a
Yes.
certain point, I think.
Ed?
I said general, to a certain point, I think at this time.
Right. General Sutton.
So, Chair Holden, Chair Lee, in anticipation of this hearing and of working with you and your members and the administration going forward, I do have some materials that would lay out what would be required. The training itself, it's a half-day orientation, 2.5 days of training. It can be done remotely. The treatment can be done remotely or in person. There's another additional cost for the data collection. Everything that's done is analyzed pre and post, so it can add to the evidentiary base that Dr. Burke had mentioned before, but I'd be glad to share that information with you. I would also say that what Mike has brought up here in terms of a way forward that is right all around us, we can touch it, we can feel it, we can see it, are the vet centers. There are 6 of them in New York City that are funded by our federal tax dollars and present storefront locations where veterans come and get counseling and their family members come, and all we need the VA to do is to show up. I will tell you this, Chair Holden and Chair Lee, I am confident, knowing of the wonderful people who work throughout the VA system tirelessly every day. Secretary McDonough would be appalled if he knew that the preeminent PTSD researcher and clinical expert, Dr. Rachel Yehuda, was blocked from coming to this hearing today to testify on this critical topic. But there is a way forward with or without the VA and the vet centers, but I am confident that once this word gets out to the top levels, and by the way, 2 weeks ago, Chair Holden, Chair Lee, I was informed by the VA that I've been named as vice chair to one of its federal advisory committees, and so I am excited now about the opportunity to bring the needs, the strengths, the opportunities for demonstrating success here in New York City directly to the Secretary of the VA.
Well, that's the way in, obviously, here, and that's great news. I just want to, I have a couple of questions for Dr. Burke on how this, how we pivot to, because you heard my story, I think, Dr. Burke, that my father's affliction went to the entire family. And I don't know if it extends PTSD to other generations beyond. Do you have any research on that? And how do we pivot in the training of the individual for somebody that's been in combat versus somebody that's been around a father or a mother that has the
cusp of doing the right thing, or we are, Chairman Holden, in the sense that you have, as your dad and literally my dad. I'm from Park Slope in Brooklyn. My father and my two uncles, in my life and childhood, as you have, Chairman Holden, and so do most of the families that have lived with veterans with severe PTSD. The first piece that we need to get into play, and will have a rolling effect or let's say it this way, the most needed thing to be done is to get the protocol into the toolbox of counselors, for instance, in New York State, which is comparatively a very inexpensive 3-day training. And with that known and the effects on those people, families will come into recognition for there is real help that does make the kind of effects that you heard Mr. Marino describe. They become better family members, and that whole affected group comes then to look for help. There is no silver bullet for PTSD. As you also heard Mike say, once a person is cured or remitted from PTSD diagnosis and all its symptoms, oftentimes you have to clean up family problems, health problems, drug and alcohol addiction problems, vocational problems. This requires a vast, as Commissioner Hendon is doing, you hear the breadth of the programs that he and Ellen and his team there are putting together. New York City is, I'm really proud. I'm 80 years old now, and I drove a cab in graduate school in Manhattan. I know the city, I know this problem well, and I am just enthused as hell, forgive my French, in terms of where this thing is going in the city. I think New York, both the city and the state, have the opportunity to model this for the country. And I'm, forgive me for being, I know you're asking for more concrete stuff in relationship to the families, Chairman Holden. I believe that has to follow getting the
for the last 13 years. And I believe we're going to use that same philosophy as we put a plan together with our group that we will present to Councilmember Holden. All 51 of your city council members will be fighting